You're not addicted to them. You're addicted to the relief. And I need you to let that land gently, because it changes the way you see yourself. When you call it addiction to them, it sounds like they have magic, like you're weak, like you can't help it. But what you're actually experiencing is your nervous system chasing a very specific moment. The moment the tension finally breaks, the moment the silence finally ends, the moment you get the message, the smile, the warmth, the tiny proof that you still matter. That relief hits you like air after being underwater, and because it feels like oxygen, your body starts to believe it needs that person to breathe. Think about it. The most intense moments weren't the calm, steady days, they were the days you were unsure. The hours you waited, the nights you replayed everything, the minutes you stared at your phone, the seconds you told yourself, don't check again, and then checked again anyway. And then finally a reply, finally a soft tone, finally a little closeness, and your whole body relaxed. Your shoulders dropped, your stomach loosened, your mind quieted, and in that moment you didn't just feel liked, you felt safe. That's why it's so powerful, because you aren't chasing a person, you're chasing safety. And here is the painful part, the relief only feels that big because the fear was that big first. The calm only feels like a high, because the anxiety was running the show. The warmth only feels like a miracle, because the cold had become normal. If someone is consistent, your system doesn't spike and crash. It doesn't swing from panic to peace. It doesn't feel like you're winning your life back with every text. But when someone is inconsistent, your body lives on a roller coaster, and roller coasters create addiction. Not because they're healthy, but because they're intense. Your mind starts to build a whole world around those moments of relief. You remember the good parts like a highlight reel. You hold on to the sweet words like they were vows. You tell yourself, see, that's who they really are. And then when they pull away again, you start hunting for that version of them. Like it's hidden somewhere behind their fear, their business, their mood, their stress. You end up chasing their potential, not their reality. You end up loving the person they are for 10 minutes, and suffering the person they are for 10 days. And calling it a complicated love story, instead of what it really is, an emotional drought with occasional rain. And the reason you blame yourself is because your brain always tries to create control in chaos. If they are distant, your mind says, maybe I said something wrong. If they go cold, your mind says, maybe I asked for too much. If they disappear, your mind says, maybe I should have been calmer. Because if it's your fault, then it's also fixable, and that gives you a false sense of power. It's terrifying to admit, I can do everything right and still not receive consistency from this person. It's terrifying to accept, their distance isn't a reflection of my worth, it's a reflection of their capacity. So instead, you pick up responsibility that was never yours, and you start performing for relief. You become careful, you become strategic, you become hyper-aware. You read between the lines, you study timing, you rewrite messages, you soften your feelings, you shrink your needs, you swallow questions that are completely normal. You call it maturity. You call it patience, you call it understanding. But if we are honest, it's fear. It's fear of losing the next moment of relief. It's fear of the silence. It's fear of the emotional winter that follows when they pull away. So you do what any human would do when they're trying to avoid pain, you adapt. But adaptation in love can become self-abandonment. Because the more you chase relief, the more you accept discomfort as the entry fee. You start tolerating crumbs because you're starving. You start celebrating the bare minimum because it feels like a miracle compared to nothing. You start saying, at least they replied, at least they called. At least they miss me. And you don't realize how low you've set the bar until you're exhausted, until you're anxious all the time, until you don't recognize the version of yourself that is always waiting. And I want you to hear this with compassion. You are not crazy for wanting that relief, because your body learned to associate them with the end of your anxiety. Your brain built a link, their closeness equals my peace. And once that link forms, you start chasing the person the way you would chase anything that calms you. The same way people chase distractions. The same way people chase reassurance. The same way people chase anything that gives them a quick release from uncertainty. It's not romance, it's regulation. You've been using them as a nervous system regulator. And that's why it feels like you can't let go. Because letting go doesn't just feel like losing them, it feels like losing your coping mechanism. And the hardest truth is this: the relief you feel when they come close is not proof of love, it's proof of imbalance. Healthy love doesn't come with withdrawals. Healthy love doesn't require you to go through emotional hunger to appreciate emotional food. Healthy love doesn't make you feel high when someone does what they should be doing anyway. Showing up, communicating, caring, being present. If someone's basic effort feels like a drug, it's because your system has been deprived. So what do you do with this? You stop shaming yourself, and you start waking up. You start naming what's happening without blaming your heart. You say, this isn't destiny, this is a cycle. You say, this isn't passion, this is unpredictability. You say, this isn't me being too needy, this is me being underfed. And when you name it, you can finally start changing it, because you can't heal what you keep romanticizing. And yes, you will still miss them, because your body will miss the relief. Your body will miss the dopamine spike. Your body will miss the moment it could finally unclench. That's why the early stage of stepping back feels like withdrawal. Because you are detoxing from the pattern. You will reach for your phone. You will want to check. You will want one more conversation, one more sign, one more moment of warmth. But every time that craving comes, you can remind yourself, I am not craving them, I am craving regulation. And then you can give yourself regulation in a way that doesn't cost you your dignity. You breathe, you ground yourself, you talk to someone safe, you write the truth down, you go for a walk, you do something that brings you back into your body. You choose a form of comfort that doesn't depend on someone who can disappear. You start becoming the source of your own relief, slowly, patiently, lovingly. Because the goal is not to become cold. The goal is to become free. Free from the loop where someone's attention decides whether you get to feel okay today. You deserve love that feels steady, not love that feels like a rescue. You deserve closeness that doesn't arrive as a reward after pain. You deserve consistency that doesn't make you feel like you've won a lottery. And the moment you truly understand that your addiction is actually your system begging for stability, you stop asking, what's wrong with me? And you start asking the only question that leads to healing. Why have I been calling relief love? Your nervous system learned to chase inconsistency. And I want you to understand that this is not a character flaw, it is a survival pattern. When someone is emotionally unpredictable, when they come close and then pull away, when they give you warmth and then go cold, your body doesn't experience it as a simple relationship issue. Your body experiences it as uncertainty, and uncertainty is one of the most distressing things the human system can hold for long. That's why you feel restless. That's why you overthink. That's why you can't just relax and see what happens. Because your system is scanning for danger and searching for safety at the same time. There is a reason you can feel calm with friends, calm with family, calm in certain parts of your life, but completely undone in this one connection. It's because this isn't just about liking someone, it's about your attachment system being activated. Attachment is the part of you that asks, am I safe with you? Can I rely on you? Will you stay? Will you respond? Will you choose me? And when the answers are inconsistent, your mind doesn't settle into clarity, it settles into pursuit. It keeps looking for the moment it can finally believe, okay, now I'm secure. And here's the piece most people miss. Consistency calms the nervous system, but inconsistency trains obsession. Think about how your mind behaves when something is stable. You don't fixate. You don't constantly check. You don't replay every detail. But when something is unstable, your brain starts working overtime to create predictability. It tries to solve the person like a puzzle. It tries to map patterns. It tries to find the exact combination of words that produces closeness. It tries to learn the timing, the triggers, the moods, the signs. And while you might call that love, what it actually is your system trying to reduce uncertainty. That's why you can become more attached to someone who gives you less. Because your attachment isn't growing from nourishment, it's growing from hunger. It's growing from the gap. It's growing from the question mark. Your heart keeps leaning in because it never gets a full answer. Your emotions keep circling because the story never gets closure. And when you finally get a little bit of contact, it doesn't just feel nice. It feels like the pressure in your body releases, and your system learns. This is what ends the discomfort. Then the cycle repeats, they pull away, the discomfort returns, you chase, they return, you feel relief. That is literally how conditioning works. So if you've been feeling like, why can't I let go? The answer might be, because your body is still expecting the next swing. It's still waiting for the next shift. It's still bracing for the next distance and hoping for the next closeness. Even when you decide in your mind, I'm done, your nervous system can still be living in the pattern. Your body doesn't update with one decision. It updates through repeated experiences of safety. That's why healing feels slow, because you're not just changing your thoughts, you're retraining your system. Now let's go deeper, because this is where it gets tender. Many people who feel addicted to inconsistent love have a history of having to work for emotional connection. Maybe not in obvious ways. Maybe you weren't neglected in a dramatic story. Maybe you were loved, but love came with conditions. Love came with performance. Love came when you were helpful, when you were quiet, when you were high-achieving, when you were easy to handle, when you didn't need too much. Or maybe you had a caregiver who was emotionally up and down, present sometimes and absent other times, affectionate one day and distant the next. When that happens, the child inside you learns a core lesson. Love is unpredictable, so I must pay attention. Love can disappear, so I must chase it. Love must be earned, so I must be good. And then you grow up, and you meet someone who feels familiar, not because they are right for you, but because the emotional climate feels like home. Your system recognizes the pattern and says, I know this. And that recognition can feel like chemistry. It can feel like fate. It can feel like a deep soul connection. But sometimes what feels like a soul connection is actually a nervous system recognition. It's your past tapping you on the shoulder and saying, here it is again. The old game, the old hunger, the old chase. And if no one ever taught you that love can be steady, then steady love can feel strange. Calm can feel boring. Consistency can feel suspicious. Your system might even reject the very thing it needs, because it doesn't know how to live without the spikes. That's why an avoidant can feel intoxicating. Not because they are better, but because they activate your entire system. They activate your hope, your fear, your longing, your imagination. They make you hyper-focused. They make you feel alive. They make you feel like you're on the edge of something, always. And you start confusing that edge with meaning. You start thinking, if this feels this intense, it must be real. But intensity is not the same as intimacy. Intensity can be anxiety wearing a romance costume. And here's the painful part. Your system starts to believe that you have to earn the next good moment. You start thinking, if I'm patient enough, they'll open up. If I'm supportive enough, they'll choose me. If I don't pressure them, they'll stay. If I love them the right way, they'll finally feel safe. And while that sounds noble, it can become a trap. Because now the relationship is not a shared experience, it becomes a project you're managing. You become the emotional caretaker. You become the one monitoring the temperature, adjusting yourself to keep it from freezing. But I want to tell you something that might break your heart and heal it at the same time. You cannot heal someone by shrinking yourself. You cannot create security by accepting insecurity. You cannot teach someone consistency by rewarding inconsistency. If they pull away and you chase, your system stays addicted and their system stays avoidant. The dance continues. The only way the dance ends is if someone stops dancing. And that someone can be you, not by turning cold, not by becoming cruel, but by becoming clear. Clear that your body is not meant to live in uncertainty. Clear that love is not meant to feel like guessing. Clear that your heart is not meant to be on standby. Clear that you don't want a relationship where the best moments come after the worst ones. Clear that you deserve calm, not because you're boring, but because you're finally valuing peace. So when your nervous system begs you to check your phone, to send the message, to ask for reassurance, to reopen the conversation, you can pause and say, "This is my system chasing familiarity." You can say, "This is my conditioning, not my destiny." You can say, "I don't have to act on the craving." Because cravings do not mean truth. Cravings mean a pattern is active. And the way you retrain this pattern is not by pretending you don't care. It's by giving your system repeated proof that you can survive discomfort without chasing. You sit in the urge and you breathe. You name what you feel and you don't run from it. You reach for safe people, for safe routines, for grounding practices. You build stability in your life until your body stops looking for it in someone who can't provide it. You learn to associate peace with your own choices, not with their return. One day, you will still remember them, but you won't shake. One day you will still care, but you won't chase. One day, you will still have a tender heart, but it will be guarded by standards, not fear. Because the goal isn't to stop feeling. The goal is to stop confusing emotional activation with love. You deserve a love that doesn't train your body to panic. You deserve a connection that doesn't punish you with distance. You deserve to feel secure without having to earn it in pieces. And the moment you truly accept that inconsistency is not romance, it is a nervous system trigger, you stop calling it chemistry, and you start calling it what it is, a pattern you are finally brave enough to break. You're trying to earn safety by performing. And I want you to hear how gentle and human that is, because you didn't wake up one day and choose to struggle, you adapted. When you're with someone who pulls away, someone who goes quiet, someone who gives affection in bursts and then disappears, your system starts looking for rules. It starts asking, what do I need to do to keep the warmth? What do I need to say to avoid the cold? How do I act so they don't shut down? And slowly, without realizing it, you stop being in a relationship and you start taking an emotional exam. At first it looks like love, because it sounds like devotion. You tell yourself you're being understanding. You tell yourself you're being patient. You tell yourself you're being mature, that you're not like other people who panic or pressure. So you learn to speak softly, you learn to wait longer, you learn to ask less, you learn to accept vague answers, you learn to pretend you're fine when you're not. You become skilled at minimizing your needs, not because you don't have them, but because you're afraid that having them will cost you the connection. And the scariest part is this: you don't just do it in the relationship, you start doing it inside yourself. You start editing your own feelings before they even reach your mouth. You start thinking about your emotions like they're dangerous. If you feel hurt, you quickly turn it into logic. If you feel lonely, you quickly turn it into self-blame. If you feel anxious, you quickly turn it into a plan. Maybe I should message less. Maybe I should be cooler. Maybe I should show I'm busy. Maybe I should prove I'm not needy. And that is performance. Not performance like you're fake. Performance like you're constantly trying to manage the outcome. Performance like you're holding your breath and hoping the right behavior will finally make someone choose you in the way you deserve. And because you're a good person, because you care, because you can see their wounds, you start making excuses that sound compassionate, but secretly keep you trapped. They had a hard past. They're stressed. They've been hurt before. They're not used to love. And listen, those things might be true, but do you know what else can be true at the same time? You can understand someone's fear and still refuse to be the place where they practice avoiding. You can empathize with their pain and still honor your own. You can see their struggle and still acknowledge that you are paying the price. The way you pay the price is subtle at first. You stop asking questions because questions create distance. You stop expressing disappointment because disappointment makes them shut down. You stop saying what you need because needs make you feel too much. So you become low maintenance. But not because you're naturally low maintenance, because you are terrified of being abandoned. You become easy, but not because you feel easy, because you are trying to be chosen. You become calm on the outside, while inside you're holding so much tension that your body doesn't know how to rest. And then something heartbreaking happens. The more you perform, the more you lose touch with your own truth. You don't know what you want anymore. You know what keeps them close. You don't know what you feel anymore. You know what you're allowed to show. You don't know what's fair anymore. You know what you can get away with asking for. And you start calling that love, because the alternative is admitting that you've been negotiating your dignity for attention. You start to measure your worth in small signals. A quick reply feels like you're valuable. A late reply feels like you're disposable. A sweet moment makes you feel chosen. A cold moment makes you feel rejected. Your self-esteem becomes a thermostat controlled by their mood. And the reason that's so exhausting is because your worth was never meant to live in someone else's hands. Your worth is not supposed to rise and fall with another person's capacity to show up. Here's what I want to say to you with love. If you have to perform to be loved, you are not being loved, you are being tolerated. If you have to shrink to keep someone, you are not being chosen, you are being managed. If you have to earn basic consistency, you are not in a partnership, you are in a constant state of proving. And proving is not intimacy. Proving is anxiety. The most addictive part of this dynamic is that you think the next version of you will finally work. You think, if I become more understanding, they'll relax. If I become less emotional, they'll stay. If I become more supportive, they'll open up. If I become the perfect safe person, they'll finally choose closeness. So you keep upgrading your performance. You become more flexible. You become more forgiving. You become more available. You become more patient. And when it still doesn't create security, you don't blame the pattern, you blame yourself. You think, maybe I'm not doing it right. And that's how the trap deepens, because now you're addicted to self-improvement as a way to earn love, instead of self-respect as a way to protect your heart. But I want you to recognize something. The moment you feel like you have to perform to keep someone, you are already in danger of losing yourself. Because love is not supposed to require constant self-monitoring. Love is not supposed to be a stage where you audition for closeness. Love is supposed to be the place where you can exhale. The place where your feelings are safe to exist. The place where your needs don't scare someone away. The place where you can be human without punishment. So ask yourself, very gently, what have you been doing to keep the peace that has been costing you your peace? What have you been tolerating to keep the connection that has been disconnecting you from yourself? How often have you silenced your truth to keep them comfortable? How often have you swallowed a tear, turned a need into a joke, turned a boundary into a compromise, turned your heart into a negotiation? Because the truth is, you're not too much. You've just been with someone who can't hold much. You're not needy. You've just been underved. You're not dramatic. You've just been living in a situation where the emotional basics are treated like a burden. And when you finally say, I don't want love that requires me to act like I don't need love, you reclaim yourself. This is where safety actually begins, not when they finally decide to show up, but when you decide to stop abandoning yourself. Safety begins when you stop rewarding distance with extra effort. Safety begins when you stop chasing clarity from someone who benefits from being unclear. Safety begins when you tell the truth, I can't keep performing for crumbs. And the shift doesn't have to be loud. It can be quiet and powerful. You can simply start showing up as the real you. You can express a need without apologizing. You can state a boundary without over-explaining. You can ask for consistency without fear. And if they disappear when you become real, then they were never in love with you. They were in love with the version of you that made their avoidance easy. You deserve a love where you don't have to practice being smaller. You deserve a love where your honesty doesn't create punishment. You deserve a love where effort is mutual, not something you provide to compensate for their absence. And if you are brave enough to stop performing, you will feel the fear first. But on the other side of that fear is the deepest relief you've been chasing all along, the relief of being loyal to yourself.